We'll look at the creature we made yesterday and go over its design philosophy a little bit more. So here we have the Ruin Guardian from Genshin Impact. Obviously, miHoYo owns the artwork, all that. Alright, so Ruin Guardians. Created by a lost civilization, these hulking machines wander the land, their purpose long forgotten, and their function leading to strife wherever they may roam. They're large, mindless constructs. They have okay perception, nothing crazy. I wanted them to be level 4, partially because my home game that I run with my wife is set in Tevat, and so I was just reflavoring other monsters as Ruin Guardians, and I wanted to have an actual one. So that's why I did this one. Very good at athletics. Most mindless creatures have 1, maybe 2 skills, and it's usually athletics and stealth. So we got high strength, relatively poor dex, a decent con, absolutely no intelligence, flat wisdom, and absolute trash charisma. This is a thing that honestly kind of is hit or miss with me, is tanking charisma for mindless creatures. I do it because of precedent, but I think it should usually just be 0. And sometimes it is. Like, zombies have 0 charisma, not -5. But most constructs have -5 charisma when they're mindless. Which doesn't make as much sense to me, because that's also running your ability to intimidate. And this is a big nasty machine. Why can't it be at least a little scary? But it is what it is. Sometimes I just go by precedent because it's easy. But anyway, it's got a good AC, if I'm remembering correctly. It's 1 point above high and probably 3 points below extreme. Got good fortitude, okay reflex, terrible will, but it's also immune to mental effects. So will being absolute trash is only going to come up now and then. It's got high HP, just barely. Has all the construct immunities: bleed, death effects, disease, doom, drain, fatigue, healing, mental, non-lethal attacks, paralyzed, poison, sicken, unconscious, vitality, and void. It has resistance 5 to physical, which is on the lower end for a level 4 creature. I believe their resistances start at 4 and go up to 7. Physical 5 except adamantine. Chances of you having adamantine at level 4 are not 0, but it's slim, and you'd be beating them with a rock most likely. But 1d4 plus strength rock might outdo, your dagger or something if you're a weaker character or a smaller weapon character. Weak point. This is because you can shoot them in the eye in the game, and I like the idea that some creatures just do have weak points. I was originally going to go with construct armor to facilitate this effect. Construct, for those of you who don't know, construct armor is basically like, hey, this creature's AC is high. It's like really high for its level. But if you critically hit it, or you get down to half hit points, its AC goes down. Permanently, basically. And I ended up not wanting to do that because it didn't really fit. Like, sure, it's a easy mechanical inference to make, but I preferred to go for the actual effects of its weak point. So Ruin Guardians bear a particular weak point at their eye. When a Ruin Guardian is critically hit by a ranged attack or other attack that could reach its eye at GM discretion, it takes an additional 5 damage and staggers, becoming slowed 1 for 1 round and is off guard for as long as it is slowed. That's just to say that its eye, if you hit it properly, does not have resistance 5, basically. That's what the additional 5 points is. And I did originally, I was going to put in where it's like, oh, if it's already slowed and you hit it again, it becomes stunned for 1 round. Because that's what happens in Genshin. But I had to pull myself back because I have a tendency to overcomplicate things or go too deep. And that was one of those moments where it's just like, this would make it match much better, but it's unnecessarily complicated and can completely just disable this thing, especially when it's already going to have its AC lowered. So you just get to slow it by hitting its weak point. It's a rider on pretty much every critical hit for reach and ranged weapons. Or if you climb up on it, you stab it in the face. I personally allow people to try and climb up enemies. Or like if it's tripped and you're just there. So it's good. It has a pretty standard speed of 25 feet. I feel like they're kind of slow for their size, but they're not really slow. So they can match a human and a standard person in speed. They've got kind of a low to hit, but they have really high damage. They're brutes. They're not very controlled for the most part. They're very heavy hitters, but they're slow. They project. I forget the term, but you can predict their moves pretty good. It does have a missile attack, as the Guardians do have missiles. Concussive, range increment 30 feet, reload 1. And this is just because they're singular missiles. I feel like should not be a great alternative to them running up and hitting you. But they do have a, I'm gonna shoot all my missiles thing going on. So we start with slamming leap. Using its weight to its advantage, the Ruined Guardian leaps and slams both fists down, crushing a 5-foot burst centered within 5 feet of the Ruined Guardian, dealing 2d10 bludgeoning damage. Basic reflex save, DC 21. The creatures that critically fail the save are knocked prone. So for those of you who don't know, these things tend to have a 3-hit combo. They swing with one fist, swing with the other, and then they leap and slam. And so, I mean, your swings are just the melee fist, and then slamming leap is its own singular attack. I put flourish on it so that it can only use it once per round, otherwise it would just be silly. And it makes for a good third hit because it doesn't use map. So this is encouraged to be the quote-unquote last attack of a combo. It has push. I decided to put push in there because this was the first one, or the first creature I've made like this since the new push was made and showed off. And it ended up not needing to be removed because the space setting ended up okay. So push, if it hits you with its fist, it can spend an action to attempt to shove you with no map or multiple attack penalty. The Unrelenting Salvo is its big missile launch. The Ruined Guardian locks itself to the ground, immobilizing itself until the beginning of its next turn. It unleashes a salvo of explosive missiles, dealing 5d6 fire damage in a 15-foot burst within 60 feet. Basic reflex save, DC 21. The Ruined Guardian cannot use Unrelenting Salvo again for 1d4 rounds. This is its quote-unquote breath weapon. It's a big, nasty burst, but not crazy big. I didn't want it to be too small either, so I didn't want to go for 20. I didn't want to go for 10. Got the difference, 15. and they're not crazy damaging for the level. Pretty standard amount. And it goes up to the second range increment, effectively, of the singular missiles. And now we have the big 3-action ability. Those of you who have fought these things may be very familiar with the fact that they will just start spinning and spinning like a top and whack you into the air and juggle you for a little while. I removed the juggling aspect, but the Ruined Guardian's torso begins to spin freely, whipping its arms around as it moves. It strides up to its speed and strikes all creatures adjacent to it during this movement. It may target the same creature only once and may push creatures that it hits. So if it hits you, it gets to push you out of the way if you would be in the way. Or attempt to, at least. That was my attempt at it's juggling, but not really. It's not like doing multiple points of damage. And this movement is not impeded by medium or smaller creatures. And if it ends its movement sharing a space with a medium or smaller creature, that creature moves to the nearest unoccupied space. This is forced movement that is not pushing or pulling. The reason for that last statement is there's a lot of confusion for people because of the way that forced movement is laid out. In my opinion, because I've learned to have to say that this is an opinion, most of forced movement is pushing and pulling. Not all of it by a long shot, but if there is basically if there's agency being overridden versus a physical force exerting on you, or a force of some kind exerting on you, that's the difference between push and pull and non-push and pull. So this is you scrambling out of the way, not them knocking you out of the way. It is forced movement because you're sharing a space, and normally the GM decides, who moves where if you end up sharing a space, but it doesn't hurt to point out so that they don't have to go look it up if they're not familiar with this sort of situation. And obviously it is only for medium and smaller creatures. If you've got a large creature, it has to move them out of the way to continue. And it's also not a friendly attack. It will hit all creatures, including quote unquote allies. But I thought it was sensible. I thought it was a good way to handle them doing their spinny top. But let me know in the comments what you think. Or if you have any questions.